Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda and this is where I talk all about knitting. Today's video is going to be all about my favorite method to alternate two skeins in the round for knitting. This is what I call the yarn forward method. It has no seam whatsoever. You're not going to have any sort of seam along the inside of your knitting. And it's super simple, way simpler than I ever thought it could possibly be. Personally, I tend to use this method when I am working on hand knit sweaters and I'm working with hand-dyed yarn that I want to alternate every round so that I don't get any weird color pooling in my knitting. And unlike helical knitting or even the normal like twisting type of yarn skein alternating that I think you're kind of taught when you first start to knit and alternate skeins, unlike those methods, I find this one really easy to use within different texture patterns in your knitting, in between cables. I like to hide this in the raglans of my sweaters a lot. I find it's a really good spot to put it, kind of like in between those two raglan stitches. It hides really well. And yeah, like I said, no seam whatsoever. So I'm not going to keep you waiting. Let's jump on in and I will show you how I use the yarn forward alternating method. Okay, so I have a little swatch started here and I'm going to be using two separate colors for my tutorial just so you can tell what I'm doing a little bit easier. But first I wanted to show you what we are avoiding using this method. So when I talk about avoiding a seam, you can see on this sweater how there's this line running down the whole back. This is the very first sweater I ever knit, by the way, so ignore the messy floats. But this seam here is made doing the normal way of alternating, where every round you twist the skein with the previous one you're using as you alternate to avoid any gaps or any weird jogs in your knitting. So this way of alternating skeins still allows you to alternate every single row. You're still going to alternate in the exact same spot in your knitting, but you're going to avoid that seam running on the inside of your knitting. So like I said, I have a little in the round swatch here started, and I'm going to knit to maybe the middle of this here. I am knitting this magic loop just because I didn't want to cast on tons of stitches for a little sample, but maybe I'll knit to the middle of this front one here and I'll show you how to start, and then we'll knit a couple rows and I can show you exactly how this technique works. And I want to keep these two balls in the screen so I can kind of show you how I manage them as well. I apologize for the change in framing here, but I had to move this up so that my cables weren't smacking on the counter too much as I do this. So let's knit. As I say that, they're still smacking. Let us knit to halfway through this. Okay, so we have reached where I am going to alternate my skeins. So the very first thing we're going to do is take the yarn that we're currently working with, take it in between our two needles and to the front of the work. So I'll show you that again. I was just knitting. I'm going to take this in between those two needles and lay it to the front of my work. Now I like to have one ball on this side and one on the other, and so because this strand here is coming from my right side ball, I push it over to the right. So now for starting this new ball of yarn here, the first thing we're going to do on the first round is just add it in like you normally would on any other project. So I'm going to stick my needle into the next stitch that I want to knit here, drape the new yarn over top, pull a loop through. There's our first stitch in the new color, and then I set myself up to continue knitting in the round. So you can see here that I have this yarn dangling in front. This is the one I'm currently not using. And here's my tail, which I guess I can also just pull through the middle so it's out of the way here. But I am just knitting with my new skein and attempting to have my cords not smack on the table. Personally, I love really long cables for Magic Loop, which can be a nuisance when filming a tutorial. So I'm going to keep knitting with this new color until we reach the point where we switched to said new color. Okay, So I have one more stitch left in the yellow, which was our original skein. I'm going to knit that. And now we're going to do our fancy little trick to alternate skeins. So first, I'm just going to take this white one here, and we're going to do the exact same thing we did with the yellow originally. So we're going to bring it in between the needles and to the front. And I'm going to just drop it and let it hang. Now we're going to grab the yellow and bring it to the back and just start knitting with it. And now I have a loosey-goosey stitch here from where I joined that white, but we'll just keep knitting with the yellow again. So you can see here where we alternated them. Like I said, I have that loose stitch, so I want to do this a couple more rounds just so it's not floppy and you can kind of understand what I'm doing a little bit better. So let me knit around with the yellow and we will do another alternate. Does take a little bit of getting used to, especially if you're knitting magic loop. If you're just knitting this on the round on a needle, it's a lot easier, but it does take some getting used to managing where those skeins are hanging and what's going on, but I promise you'll get it. Okay, so once again, I have one more stitch left until I hit where the skein we left off with is dangling in the front. So I'm going to knit that stitch. I'm going to take my yellow yarn. I'm done with it. So I'm going to take it to the front in between my two needles. And now you can see how I do my alternating thing. So if I dropped it here and let it go off to the left, it would tangle with my white yarn. So I'm going to make sure that I drop it over to the side that that ball of yarn is sitting in front of me, and then it won't tangle with my white yarn. So now that yellow yarn is in front and in between those needles, we're going to pick up the yarn we're working with now for this round, which is the white. We're going to bring it between those needles and back to the back again, so we're ready to knit. And something else I want to note is that every once in a while, maybe I can pull it here to show you. Do you see how that white stitch has kind of become a little loosey-goosey from sitting there and waiting? So sometimes you might find you have to tug ever so slightly just to tighten that stitch up, but our white yarn is to the back again, so we're just going to start knitting. So again, ignore where I joined that white yarn originally, but you can see our waiting skein is dangling in the front there. We're knitting with our white, and you can kind of see what's going on with that alternating there. So maybe I'll do this one more time, and then hopefully you will understand how to alternate skeins in the round with the yarn forward method. Okay, we're going to knit that last stitch before where we dropped the previous skein. Now this white yarn is going to go in between these two needles into the front. Leave it there to hang. Pick up our yellow one and bring it through that same spot between the needles. Right there. Back to the back, so we're ready to knit again. And just start knitting. So, as I promised you, let me flip this inside out, and you'll notice zero seam. Totally seamless, other than the fact that I am using two different colors of yarn for this example. You can't tell where I alternated those skeins at all. This here is obviously where I joined in my new ball of yarn, but otherwise you can't tell at all where I was alternating those skeins. So there you have it. I hope this video was helpful to you. If you want to rewatch it, you can totally do so. You can also slow this video down. In the bottom right-hand corner of this video, there's an option to slow the video down to like 0.5 speed, 0.25 speed, or you could speed it up I'm not sure why you would want to speed it up. You can also ask me any questions that you possibly have down below in the comments, but hopefully today you've learned something new that you can use in your knitting, and I hope it saves you some time. No more twisting skeins on the back of your knitting. And with that, I will see you next week for a regular podcast video. Bye!